Centralized Hotspot Service in MikroTik Part 1. In this video, Centralized Hotspot Service in MikroTik Part 1. I will try to demonstrate on how to configure a centralized hotspot service in MikroTik. So we will have a main router where we will configure our hotspot service. For the purposes of this demonstration, we will only configure basic hotspot settings. We will not tinker on other settings and just achieve a working hotspot with default templates. Also, our hotspot users will only be configured locally. We won't be making use of other features such as userman. We will have other routers to serve our end clients, but there will be no hotspot service configured on these routers, as our objective is to centralize hotspot configuration and user management on our main router only. But the end clients of these routers should be able to access the hotspot service, authenticate, and gain internet access. This will be our demonstration topology for our centralized hotspot service in MikroTik. So we have an internet cloud here wherein our main router or main MikroTik is connected via Ether 1. So we should configure an internet connection to this one. So basically our hotspot should provide internet to our end users. So we will configure the corresponding, whether it's an static IP or a DHCP client, and the corresponding route and the corresponding network address translation. Then this MikroTik device is connected to our manage switch on port number 2 or Ether 2. So as you can see, this is a trunk port because it will allow VLANs 88 and 99 to traverse to this link. We have a sample management PC that is connected on port number 3 on this MikroTik router. So this will be on the VLAN 88 management segment. So basically we will try to do some connectivity test, see if this PC will be able to ping, for example, the management IP of this MikroTik hotspot router. Ether 2 and Ether 3 will be a part of our bridge, and we will create layer 3 VLAN interfaces for that bridge, and this will be the IP corresponding for those VLAN interfaces. So for VLAN 88, this will be the management IP, and for VLAN 99, this will be the hotspot IP. Once we make sure that all of the prerequisites are in place, so meaning to say we have created our bridge interface, we make these ports as a member of the bridge, we have configured our VLAN appropriately and added 88 and 99 to this corresponding trunk ports, and its PVID on Ether 3. And once we determine that it can go to the internet, then we will configure the hotspot service for this MikroTik router. As noted on our intro, so we will not go through each and every settings of the hotspot menu in MikroTik. So we would like only to achieve basic hotspot functionality with its default templates. So as long as we are sure that it is providing hotspot service, then that will be okay. Since our demo is just to illustrate that we have a main router with a hotspot service configured or installed, and it is possible that these other routers or other site routers will be able to share or to communicate to the hotspot server as you may indulge. And the clients will be able to authenticate via the hotspot user database in this main router. So just in case you are curious on how this managed switch is configured or set up in GNS3, obviously we will like to use an actual managed switch. So, but here on Ether 1, Ether 2, and Ether 3, they are configured as .1 queue and not access port. So basically, it tells the managed switch that please consider Ether 1, Ether 2, and Ether 3 as a trunk port. And finally, this is only part 1 of the centralized hotspot video tutorial series. So we will only settle or limit ourselves on this left side or left portion of this topology wherein the connection is wired. So we will have another continuation for this centralized hotspot, but this time we will configure real access points. And for example, we have a video for our MikroTik disk light in order for our hotspot to traverse. Let's say if we have a sample site that is connected to our main router, but not via wired connection, but wireless connection. So that will be on part number 2 or the next video tutorial of the centralized hotspot video tutorial series. Okay, so I powered on our MikroTik device. So if you want to review, so we have our picture or screenshot of the topology. So we are basically configuring this router, empty hotspot, and we are configuring from scratch. So let's begin. So let's click connect to this MikroTik using Winbox. So our objective is this MikroTik router should be able to connect to the internet. Bridge will be configured and the corresponding ports will be added, and VLAN interfaces will also be configured. Then finally, we will configure the hotspot. Okay, so let's take care first of our internet connection. So empty dash hotspot is connected to the internet via port 1 or Ether 1. And perhaps we should rename or change the identity first of this MikroTik router from the default MikroTik name to MikroTik empty hotspot. Next is if we take a look, so our Ether 1 will be our to the internet or the port towards the internet. For simplicity, our internet service provider that is somewhere located here is giving us an IP address. So meaning to say we will configure our empty dash hotspot ether 1 as a DHCP client. So you'll need to go to IP, DHCP client, and ether 1 is now configured with the DHCP client. So if this is not here, you just basically add the ether 1. Either you use the peer DNS or you have your own DNS server, or use peer NTP or you have your own NTP server. For us, we will add default route. Unless you know the gateway or the next hop IP address, then can configure the IP routes from here. But for us, since this is not the core of our tutorial, so let's just leave it as check. So basically, uh, our our okay. So let's try to verify if we are able to go to the internet. So we can close this DHCP client window. We can go to Tools, Ping, and ping our favorite test IPs. So we can have the quadruple 8 or we could have the quadruple 9s. So obviously if you want to resolve names, so we could put here our DNS servers. So we have the DNS servers already configured. So if we will try to check if our router will be able to reach domain names, so for instance google.com, and ping another set of domain name, so youtube.com, and yes, we are able to resolve names on our empty-hotspot router. Okay, next will be to create the bridge interface and to add the corresponding ports that are members of the bridge. So this task can be seen, or you can check our video with regards to Bridge VLAN filtering, so for more information. So if we go back to our diagram, Ether2 and Ether3 are members of the bridge, so bridge. So let's just, for simplicity, make use of the default one, bridge1 as the name. So ports will be Ether2 and Ether3. Okay, so Ether2 is the one going to the managed switch, and Ether3 is the one is connected or will be connected to the management PC. So if you'll see, the management PC will have a VLAN of 88. So we could from here already configure Ether3 with the VLAN of 88. So I double click the Ether3, go to the VLAN tab, and put in a PVID value of 88 for our management VLAN. For our Ether2, we will just stay put with the VLAN PVID1 unless there is a requirement to change into a different VLAN number. So next we'll go to VLANs. So remember, we have two VLANs, 88 and 99. So we'll add them. So bridge, here we will add 88 first. So the tag interface will be our bridge. And also remember, we have a connection to the switch. This will also be a tag interface. So Ether2 will be added. Okay, so Ether2 will be added here. So apply, okay. And that is for VLAN 88. So also VLAN 88 is, there is an Ether3 port that is an access port wherein our management PC is connected to it. So we can go back here, and on the untag portion we will select the Ether3 and we'll add the Ether3. So apply, okay. So current untag and current untag, or current tag or current untag, you can change the columns to what is your configured tag and untag. So you can uncheck the current, so to see what is the configured tag and untag interfaces for this particular VLAN. So next is the hotspot VLAN, which is VLAN 99. So we'll just simply go to VLANs and click plus and 99. So the tag will remain the same. So bridge 1 and add the ether 2. So again, so the bridge and the ether 2. So there are no other ports that is either tag or untag or access port for the hotspot VLAN. So this should be the only configuration for VLAN ID 99. So click apply, click OK. Okay, so unless we miss something, so all is left here on the bridge menu is to go back to the bridge tab, go inside the bridge settings, and under the VLAN tab, check the VLAN filtering. So we will proceed and check the VLAN filtering. Okay, so we will close the bridge menu for now. Next is we go to the interfaces. So remember, we have two VLAN interfaces. So we have a layer 2 portion wherein VLAN 88 and VLAN 99 will traverse to this link. However, because it has or it needs to have an IP address. So we will create a layer 3 interface. So in this case, a VLAN interface. So we need to go to the interfaces menu, and from the interface tab, we have some options here, and we'll select the VLAN interface. So we'll select the VLAN. So you could put in a descriptive name. You can put MGT for management for VLAN number 88, and interface will be bridge. Okay, so apply and okay. So we have our first VLAN. So obviously you don't have any VLAN ID numbers, or you can simply make use of the name to be a descriptive name. So MGT-VLAN 88. Okay, so we at least have a VLAN ID number on the name to be descriptive enough. Next is we add another VLAN, which is Hotspot VLAN 99, and the VLAN ID is 99, and the interface will still be the bridge interface. We click apply and we click OK. So now we have two VLAN interfaces under the bridge interface. And all is left is to add or to create IP addresses for the respective VLAN interfaces. Let's configure the IP addresses for our VLAN interface. So we can close this interface menu and head over to IP addresses. So we have our dynamic IP address for our Ether1. So we will add this particular IP for our management, which is VLAN 88, 10.88.0.1/24. So 10.88.0.1/24 on our VLAN 88 interface. So apply, OK. Next will be for our hotspot. So we'll just click plus sign, 10.99.0.1/24. So let's just review, and it's correct. And let's select the correct interface, hotspot-VLAN 99 interface, apply, OK. So we now have our IP address configured for both of our VLAN interfaces. So after this is we could configure already our IP hotspot service for our hotspot service in this particular router, but we could also do a check first, see if our VLAN is working, and we could check on the management side. So I could create a DHCP server for this management VLAN 88 interface, or for simplicity, we could just assign a static IP address on this particular subnet 10.88.0.0/24 network and see if we will be able to communicate or connect to this empty-hotspot router. I powered up the PC simulator for our management PC. So if we take a look at the current IP address, so it's not ipconfig or fconfig, but for the simulator is show IP. So I statically configured IP address 10.88.0.100 on the same segment as our management VLAN. So for simplicity's sake, so as just a static IP. And now we will test via ping command if we can be able to reach our VLAN 88 interface at the IP address 10.88.0.1. So if there is a reply on this ping test, meaning to say at least our VLAN configuration is working fine. Okay, so let's now hit enter and see the response. And yes, there is a reply coming from 10.88.0.1. So at least on the management side, we are okay, and we can now proceed further on our configuration of our empty-hotspot router. We are back here in our MikroTik router. So we will now proceed to configure our hotspot service. So we could close this address menu or window. So we'll go to IP menu, hotspot. So if we'll take a look at the tabs, so there is no configuration yet, okay, on our hotspot service. So again, this is a video just to demonstrate how to configure central hotspot service. So we will have a separate video in order to go to these menus or these tabs to further configure our hotspot. But for this demonstration, I will just make use of the hotspot setup or a wizard for us to be able to make a basic hotspot up and running. Alright, let's proceed. So click on the hotspot setup. So under the hotspot interface, so we will select our hotspot VLAN 99 interface. So click next. It should display correctly what you configured as an IP address for your hotspot. So in this case, it should display 1099.0.1/24. We will masquerade the network. Okay, so we will click next. So this is the address pool. Again, for simplicity, I could change the range or address pool of our hotspot, and we could also create our own set of pools. But again, this is not the time for detailed configuration of our hotspot. So basically, I'll just click next. We don't have any certificate or SSL certificate for our hotspot. Let's click next. We don't have any SMTP server, so we will leave it as the default one or the given one. So let's click next. The DNS servers, okay, I'm content with just having this one or quadruple 8, or you could have your own DNS servers. So next, DNS name, so that will be our domain name or name for our hotspot. Again, so we'll just make use of this as an example, inquirinity.wi-fi or perhaps even inquirinity.hotspot, okay, for our example. So click next. So the local hotspot user, so you could perhaps change the admin to a different user, and the password for this user, again for simplicity's sake, is 1234567 8. So once we click next, so it should be completing or our setup unless there are some issues with what we have chosen or configured. So click next, and setup has completed successfully. Obviously, you have again additional changes, for example, your templates for your design. But again, this is not the time for the detailed configuration for our hotspot. Okay, so let us just go through to the what is configured by the hotspot setup. So basically, you have a hotspot server now under the hotspot VLAN 99 interface with the following timeouts, addresses per MAC. You could change this one to what is the appropriate number, okay, address pool. You can also change that one. Server profiles, you now have a new server profile wherein you can change your name, and obviously you could change any settings on here, and if you are using a radio server. And next is the users. So we don't have any other extra users yet. We will create one, but we will just come back for this users tab. So user profiles, you could create your own user profiles, whether it's shared user or not, and their corresponding limits. And if there are any active hotspot connection or connected to your hotspot network but not yet authenticated, so there are some things here to take a look at. But again, we are just making sure our hotspot is up and running, and see to it if we can authenticate an example or sample hotspot user on a remote router. Also, just a side note, so by doing a hotspot setup. So aside from what is created here on the hotspot menu, so there are other extra settings that are added on your MikroTik on the different facilities. So namely, if you will check your IP firewall filter, so these are rules that are related to your hotspot. Okay, so under the NAT or NAT, you'll also have the hotspot related NAT rules, and you could see some masquerade rule here on your hotspot network 1099.00/24. Okay, so we'll close this one and discuss that on future or later time. Okay, so what we can do here is to add sample or test users so that we could assign it or provide it on our Site 1 PC user, which is connected on our empty-site1 router. So we will still configure this. After we configure this router, then we will connect the PC and see if it could see what we call the hotspot service on this particular router. So for that, we'll just go to the users tab. Again, there is another way on adding or creating users. So this is just the local user database, which is built in already on the hotspot. Again, there are more options to choose from. Okay, so just add a user. So for simplicity, user 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so for simplicity's sake, I will not create any limits. For us, we'll just be able to determine if the hotspot service is extended to here, and our site PC will be able to authenticate this particular user. Okay, so apply. Okay, so for our part 2, we will perhaps create another or extra user, user number 2, but we will leave this user for now. Okay, so I powered up the second router or the empty-site1 router. So again, there is no configuration yet. So we'll click on this one and click connect. So we'll maximize this one. So for our MikroTik. So we will change the identity first. So empty site number 1. Okay. So if you'll notice, there is no bridge configured. There are no IP addresses configured. So pretty much this is a blank router without any configuration. So we will now start configuring this empty-site1 router. So basically, we will just configure the interfaces to be a member of a bridge and corresponding VLAN for the management because it has a management IP of 1088.0.2. Other than that, we will not configure any hotspot service here because again, that's the objective of our tutorial, that the hotspot service is centralized. So Ether 1 and Ether 4 will be our members for our bridge. So let's minimize this for a moment. Let's go to bridge menu, add a new bridge. So let's accept the defaults, apply, OK. Go to ports tab, add the Ether 1, apply OK. Add another one, which is Ether 4, apply and OK. Okay. Then I can go into Ether 4 and go to the VLAN tab and change the PVID to the hotspot VLAN. Apply OK. So if you notice here, the Ether 4 is connected to a site PC directly. But obviously, if we will having to have an hotspot interface, you'll have an access point here. So instead, access point will be connected on the Ether 4 rather than directly a PC, so that our wireless clients, such as laptop or a mobile device, should be able to connect to that particular access point which has a hotspot service connected via VLAN 99 connected to our main router. But if you are planning to have an access point that will carry multiple SSIDs other than this hotspot service, then that will be another configuration and you'll have some tag configuration on the Ether 4 as well. So let's go to VLANs and we'll add the VLAN 88 for our management. So again, the tag interface will be Ether 1 as well as the bridge interface. So let's tag the Ether 1 or the bridge first and the Ether 1 interface. So apply and OK. And we'll change the columns so that we will see what are really configured as the tag and the untag ports or interfaces. So let's add the VLAN 99. So 99 here. So we will not be having an IP for our hotspot interfaces or hotspot interface. So just add the Ether1 as the tag interface. Okay, so let's try this first. So apply and click OK. So also we have an untag interface on Ether 4. Okay, so we'll also add the Ether 4, but this time on the untag interface. So apply and OK. Okay, so we will just come back here if there are some settings that we need to adjust. But for now, let's leave it that way. Okay, so on the bridge 1, VLAN 88, bridge 1, Ether 1, bridge 1 on VLAN 99 hotspot, the tag is Ether 1, the untag is Ether 4. Now, you go to the bridge menu or bridge tab and double click the bridge, and on the VLAN tab, we enable the VLAN filtering. Apply, OK. So we'll close the bridge window or bridge menu for now. Let's add the management VLAN interface. So we go to interface menu, add a VLAN interface. So again, MGT VLAN 88, and this is VLAN number 88 on the bridge menu. Apply, OK. Next is we'll add an IP address for that management interface, which is 10.88.0.2/24. Okay, so apply, OK. So we could now perhaps test from the management PC here, see if our VLAN configuration is working by testing or issuing a ping command. So this is also in 10.88.0.0 network. So it should be able, or this PC should be able to reach the management IP of this MT-Site1 router. So let's try this time. So we are back at our management PC. So this one. So again, it still carries an IP of 10.88.0.100. So let's us confirm again if we will be able to reach the MT-hotspot router, and yes. So but our objective is, can we now reach our second router which has a management IP of 10.88.0.2 from the management PC that is actually connected on this router and not on this router. Okay, so here we go. And yes, we have successfully reached or connected to our second router. So now, all what's left is to turn on this sample PC. So it has a browser here, which we could test if first we could acquire a hotspot network IP. So we should be able to acquire 10.99.0 dot something on our PC here. And next, we should be able to see the hotspot page or default page. And finally, we will issue the username and password, or type in the username and password and see if it can authenticate to this hotspot network, and for final verification if this site PC will be able to go or access the internet. So I powered up the Site1-PC. So if you take a look and review the diagram, so the Site1 PC is connected to the Ether 4 interface. Okay, so in this simulator, so use DHCP, so there's no static IP, and we'll check on the terminal, see if it obtains an IP. So remember, we don't have any DHCP server here on our empty-site1. So meaning to say the DHCP server or the provider of the IP address is coming from this router. So the empty-hotspot, when you configure a hotspot setup, it will also create a DHCP server here on this particular router. So that is what we are expecting, or what we are aiming, that we can get an IP from that particular router. So let's now if config. So you'll notice that yes, indeed, we got an IP 10.99.0.254. And if we'll try to perform a ping on our hotspot interface, so 10.99.0.1, we don't have any response yet. Okay, so because we need, in hotspot, we need to authenticate first and issue that particular username and password for our hotspot interface. I just want to show quickly that on the hotspot router, under the hotspot menu, under the host tabs, so you could see that our PC1 is indeed displayed or listed here, as it acquires an IP address 10.99.0.254. However, we are not yet on the active table. So we will now issue this user1, and the password is 1234567 for our example, and we will use these credentials to log into our hotspot service. Now let's try to log in or to access that hotspot page. We'll close this for now and type in the DNS name of our hotspot, so inquirinity.hotspot. And yes, indeed, we now have the beautiful default hotspot template or page by MikroTik. Of course, you are free to change to the hotspot design appropriate for your business or for your company. So, but this one is only a demonstration. So user 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we'll now authenticate based on this particular user. So let's click connect. And indeed, we are now connected. And if we take a look at the active table, so we are now also here. So once you authenticate, you are not only in this host table, but also you are now on the active table. So one final verification is, let's test our connection to our router and to the internet sites or to internet addresses. So let's begin with the 99.0.1. So a while ago that we haven't authenticated yet, this could not be reached. And now we have a response. Let's ping some public IPs. And yes, there is a response. And let's try to ping www.youtube.com. And yes, indeed, there is a response. As a summary, we successfully configured a centralized hotspot service. So we have a main router where we configure hotspot, and we make use of VLAN to our main router, manage switch and site routers. As tested, our hotspot end user was able to get an IP address, reach or open the hotspot page, authenticate, and gain internet access. So see you on our upcoming video for the next part of this tutorial. Thank you for watching.